Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere a little grim, but don't worry, you're already doomed. You arrive in Kyoto just as the sun slips behind low rooftops, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. You're late, naturally, and wearing at least 20 pounds of armor that no one asked for. The horses you rode in on are somewhere near the river now, probably stealing someone's laundry. The tea house stands modestly in the corner of a walled garden, tucked under a canopy of pine. From the outside, it looks like a slightly judgmental shed. Your boots squish as you cross the threshold. Not from rain, but from the slow realization that everything here is about to be uncomfortable and intentional. A thin trail of incense snakes out from the entrance, daring you to pretend you belong here. Inside waits a host who will not greet you, a ceremony that will not explain itself, and a floor designed to punish the tall. You're here for tea, allegedly, but nothing about. This feels like a break, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Comment where you're tuning in from tonight, and the local time, so I can be quietly impressed or concerned. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward and immediately hit your head on the low wooden beam above the door. Of course, it's not a design flaw, it's on purpose. Samurai like you are meant to bow before entering the tea room, to leave your ego, and possibly your helmet, behind. This isn't a battlefield, it's worse. Your eyes adjust to the dim light. No one says anything. The silence presses against you, heavier than armor. A kettle murmurs in the distance, already mid-rant. You try to read the room, but the room is already reading you. Outside, the world is war. Inside, the enemy is subtlety. Welcome to the ceremony. You will not be relaxed. You're told to remove your footwear, which is strange because you're also told nothing at all. The host merely gestures at your feet and stares meaningfully. You unlatch your armored boots with a chorus of clanks, attempting to look dignified while yanking off socks that haven't known dryness since Osaka. Now barefoot, and 15% shorter, you shuffle toward the doorway. It's not really a door. It's more of an apology slot. Just over 3 feet tall, it demands that you crouch so deeply, you begin to question your lineage. Crawling on your hands and knees, you squeeze through, your helmet grating softly against the lintel like a regret. This humiliating maneuver has a name, Nijiriguchi. It translates roughly to the crawling entrance, but it might as well mean abandon hope. Historians still argue whether this door was built small to force, humility, or simply because lumber was expensive. Either way, your pride doesn't fit through it. You emerge into the tea room like a confused turtle. The others have already arrived, kneeling in polite misery around the sunken hearth. No one acknowledges your entrance, except for a small nod from the host, which may also be a critique of your posture. Your knees meet the tatami mat. They hate it. You attempt Caesar, the formal sitting position, and instantly regret every decision that led you here. Your shins go numb faster than your confidence. Meanwhile, your phone is dead, but so are your neighbors. One is staring serenely at the hanging scroll. Another is gently perspiring into his sleeves. Everyone is deeply committed to pretending this is fine. Your damp tunic clings to you like a needy ghost. There's a soft hiss from the kettle. You're beginning to realize this isn't a ceremony. It's a gauntlet disguised as etiquette, and you've only just arrived. The room is a perfect square, small enough to feel like a shared secret or a polite trap. 4.5 tatami mats fit the floor exactly. Not 5, not 4, 4.5. Because symmetry is too loud and 5 is just showy. You try to remember the last time a space was built specifically to unnerve you and realize. The answer is earlier today, when you crawled in through that hobbit hole. The walls are undecorated save for a single hanging scroll, handwritten in fluid brushstrokes you can't quite decipher, but assume is either a Zen koan or a veiled insult. Your host glides across the mats like a man who has never stubbed a toe. He places a ceramic bowl on the floor with such precision that you feel personally sloppy. This is not a room for warriors. This is a room designed to remind warriors that they are, in fact, made of skin, and that skin creaks when it kneels too long. The tea room, or chashitsu, is more than a place. It's a philosophy with walls. Everything here is intentional. The rough texture of the plaster, the single flower in a vase, the way the light filters through the paper window like it's afraid to interrupt. You shift your weight and try to pretend you're just appreciating the ambience, not desperately trying to locate your left foot under your thigh. That foot has not sent word in some time. Historians still argue whether tea rooms were truly peaceful sanctuaries or just a passive-aggressive power flex. Imagine forcing your enemies into silence, making them drink hot grass water, and judging their every movement, and calling it hospitality. The scroll continues to say nothing, or everything. You nod solemnly at it, hoping it forgives your posture. Remember the pride you left at the door. It's not welcome here. Neither are loud thoughts, sharp edges, or your spine in its current condition. And somewhere, deep in the stillness, the ceremony begins to whisper. Outside the tea room, your swords are resting on a wooden rack like exiled royalty. You place them there yourself. First the long blade, then the short, without being asked. Not because you're polite, but because that's the rule. And here's the thing, samurai never go anywhere without their swords. It's like asking a modern soldier to leave their boots at the door, or a politician to leave their microphone. But in this room, even the fiercest warrior is disarmed, literally and existentially. This act isn't just tradition, it's symbolic. Surrender. You're not here to fight, at least not with blades. You're here to wrestle with grace, patience, and a bowl of powdered green mystery. Historians still argue whether this disarming custom was meant to ensure peace, or simply to make everyone equally vulnerable. Either way, your hands feel heavier without a hilt to hold. You settle your empty palms on your knees, like a child waiting to be scolded by nature itself. Your fellow guests have already achieved a level of serenity that looks suspiciously like dissociation. One is calmly tracing the grain of the wooden pillar. Another has closed his eyes, possibly meditating or possibly napping with dignity. For now. Meanwhile, you're trying not to lean forward and fall flat on your ceremonial face. The host kneels by the hearth with the confidence of a man who's never had his leg fall asleep in public. He begins tending to the coals, his movements deliberate, quiet, reverent, and all the while, your swords wait outside, soaked in dusk, probably having a better time than you. You glance toward the door, just a flick of the eyes. But even that feels loud in here. Your katana is out there. You are in here. And this divide, this soft, silent barrier, feels more dangerous than any battlefield. Because here, you can't defend yourself with steel, only with stillness. The host has not spoken, not once, not even a grunt. He moves like mist in human form, gliding from utensil to kettle without so much as a sigh. You watch him gently lift a wooden ladle, inspect it like it just whispered something offensive, and set it down again, precisely where it was. It's becoming clear. He is not just preparing tea, he is judging you with choreography. Every flick of his sleeve, every fold of the cloth is a silent commentary on your posture, your breathing, your ability to exist without ruining the vibe. You wonder if he knows about the time you tripped in front of a daimyo. He probably does. This man, the Teishu, holds more power here than any general on a battlefield, not because he commands troops, but because he controls the tempo of the room. And right now, the tempo is glacial. Historians still argue whether tea masters were spiritual guides or high-functioning control freaks with an eye for moss. This, at least, is definitely both. You try to mimic the stillness of your companions, but your left knee has opinions, and your right foot has left the group chat. You shift slightly, which feels like shouting. The host unfolds a square of silk, with the gravity of unveiling a sacred relic. Then he refolds it. Then he unfolds it again. You realize this ritual is not about efficiency. It's about presence, and possibly about making sure you stew in your own thoughts like an underprepared soup. Meanwhile, your stomach growls in the tone of a distant gong. You ignore it. Everyone else does too. Either they're more centered than you, or they've gone, completely numb. Remember that door you crawled through? It was a warning. And now you're deep inside the ceremony, where even the silence is watching you, and the ladle hasn't even touched water yet. At last, the fire begins. But not with matches, not with sparks, with ritual. The host delicately lifts each charcoal piece with long metal chopsticks, placing them in the hearth like he's assembling a small, angry puzzle. Each motion is molasses slow, deliberate, reverent. He places one ember, then pauses, places another, then pauses again. You wonder if he's doing this just to mess with you. He probably is. But also, it's tradition. This is the Sami Temai, the charcoal-laying portion of the ceremony. Its function is both literal, heating water, and spiritual, boiling, away your expectations of time, and maybe hope. The coals hiss quietly as they settle into the ashes. You too begin to hiss, internally, as your back screams in cursive. Meanwhile, your feet are staging a quiet rebellion. You pretend you're meditating. You're actually bargaining with your left hamstring. The temperature in the room rises slightly, just enough to make you question whether wearing layers under armor was smart. Spoiler, it wasn't. Historians still argue whether this segment of the ceremony was a true act of contemplation, or just the host showing off his fire-stacking skills. One thing's clear. He's doing it better than you ever could. Smoke curls lazily upward, mixing with the scent of tatami, incense, and your own slow dehydration. The heat isn't intense, but it's precise, like a quiet accusation. You blink, sweat away from your brow, grateful at least for the silence, which now feels less like peace and more like pressure. You remember when tea meant something quick, something poured, not performed. That memory feels like a lifetime ago. The fire crackles softly. The kettle has not yet been placed. That's later. First, more folding, more gestures, more waiting. The charcoal glows, tiny red eyes watching you, reminding you that stillness is work and patience is pain in a really polite costume. And now you wait for the water and the reckoning. Finally, the host brings out the tea, or at least what will become tea, eventually. It's not a pot, it's not a bag. It's a fine green powder in a small lacquered container, handled like it contains state secrets. This is matcha, ground from tender young leaves shaded from sunlight and pulverized by stone. You will now drink it, and you will be grateful. The host scoops a small portion, absurdly small really, into a bowl. Then he ladles in just enough hot water to insult your thirst. Slowly, with calm vengeance, he begins to whisk. Not stir, whisk. The bamboo whisk, or chasen, flickers like a breeze in a box. The powder blooms into a thick, frothy green suspension with the consistency of regret. You will be offered koicha, or thick tea. It's not bitter, it's not sweet, it's present. The texture of pond, the mood of apology. When the bowl is passed to you, you bow, not too high, not too low. You rotate it clockwise. You pretend you know why. You lift it with both hands and sip. It is warm, it is grassy, it is judging you. Historians still argue whether thick tea was meant to unify warriors in solemn reflection, or just stun their taste buds into silence. Either way, no one is talking. The flavor coats your mouth like a well-meaning scolding. You nod. Not because you're enlightened, but because you're supposed to. The host watches you as if your soul is being scanned for impurities. You pass the bowl. The next guest repeats the ritual. You pretend not to compare sips. Meanwhile, your foot has fallen so deeply asleep, it might be dreaming of a better ceremony. The heat from the hearth creeps up your spine like a memory of summer you didn't ask for. Remember when the hardest part was crawling through the door? That was adorable. Now, you are inside the green silence, and it's inside you, for now. Your eyes wander to the one piece of visual flair in the room, the hanging scroll. It's not there for decoration. It's the room's soul staring at you in calligraphy. Today's scroll reads something like, "One moment, one meeting," or maybe "Don't mess this up." It's written in bold, flowing strokes that seem to hum in the corner of your vision. You're not sure if you're supposed to meditate on it or feel mildly chastised by it. This is the kakemono, and it's chosen specifically for this exact ceremony, for this exact group. The host hung it before anyone arrived. No one talks about it. Everyone is quietly absorbing its mood, pretending to be profound. Historians still argue whether the scroll's presence was meant to inspire contemplation or quietly direct your emotional performance. Either way, it's working. You now feel like the scroll is judging how you held your bowl. You nod at it, again. You're not sure why. Everyone does. It feels rude not to. Just beneath the scroll sits a single flower in a bamboo vase. Not an arrangement, just one flower, slightly wilted, painfully deliberate. It's called chabana, and it's supposed to reflect the transient beauty of life. You stare at it too long and start wondering if the flower is doing better than you emotionally. It probably is. The room is a study in minimalism, but somehow still full of pressure. Every creak of your kneecap, every itchy thread of your robe, every single breath feels amplified by the blankness of the space. Your host pours more water into the kettle now, and the soft bubbling begins again. You wish you could sink into that sound, disappear into it like steam, but the scroll is still there, watching. And that one flower? Yeah, it's drooping slightly in your direction. You're sure that's on purpose. The host returns with a small, chipped tea bowl. Not broken, intentional. The kind of flawed that costs more than your horse. It's rustic, uneven, muted, and you're supposed to admire it like a sunrise. This is Wabi Sabi, a philosophy of beauty in imperfection, simplicity, and quiet decay. And right now, it feels a lot like being roasted gently by a ceramic object. He sets the bowl down and folds his fukusa, a silky cloth used for purifying the utensils. With such excruciating care, you start to suspect it has its own emotional needs. Each movement is deliberate, yet not performative, which makes you feel even more like an accidental tourist in someone else's dream. You're offered a sweet, a small, jelly-like confection made of red bean paste, shaped like a seasonal flower. It looks too elegant to eat and too small to make. A difference. You take a bite. It's fine. Delicately disappointing. Like someone tried to make dessert from philosophy. Meanwhile, your numb leg is transitioning from asleep to betrayal. You shift again, apologizing silently to the tatami mat, the tea bowl, and possibly the ghost of Sen no Rikyu. Historians still argue whether wabi-sabi truly reflected samurai values or was an aesthetic imposed on them by tea masters with strong opinions about moss. Either way, you're starting to realize this ceremony isn't here to comfort you. It's here to make you notice discomfort and like it. You glance once more at the flower, which seems even more wilted than before. It could be you. Remember the perfectly imperfect tea bowl? It has more self-esteem than you do at this point. And the scroll? It hasn't moved, but somehow it's definitely smirking. You swallow the last of your sweet. The aftertaste is subtle, shame, with a hint of bean. Stillness surrounds you, and your own body continues to whisper complaints into the void. The water begins to swirl, not boil, swirl, like it's daydreaming about boiling, but isn't quite ready to commit. The host dips the ladle again, and the steam rises in slow, spiraling ribbons, wrapping the room in its soft fingers. You're watching water being poured, and yet you're sweating, like someone reading a scroll aloud in front of their in-laws. The host pours with a stillness that borders on menacing. The stream of water hits the bowl with a whisper, a gentle sigh that somehow echoes louder than any war cry. This is choreography, not service. Every turn of the wrist, every tilt of the ladle seems engineered to expose how clumsy you are by comparison. Historians still argue whether the slow pour is meant to encourage mindfulness or to give guests more time to silently panic. Right now, it's doing both. The whisk returns, chasten, like a tiny bamboo tornado. The host whips the matcha with the same serene expression someone might wear while solving a centuries-old riddle. You try to appear calm, but your face is doing too many things. Your turn again. Another bowl, this time thinner, called usucha. It's meant to be lighter, airier, friendlier. You sip, it's not bad. Still tastes like grass and wisdom, but it goes down easier, like the ceremony is softening toward you, or maybe just preparing you for the end. You bow, you rotate the bowl, you hand it back, you survive, barely. Meanwhile, your knees have begun writing a formal complaint. Your spine is trying to escape through your robe. You long for a modern teabag, or even a vending machine. Remember the charcoal from earlier? It's burned down to a soft, smouldering hush. The kettle whistles, not sharply, but like it too, is ready for this to be over. But the host? Still pouring, still watching, still testing. And you? Still here, still thirsty for approval. Now comes the part that feels like a prank wrapped in reverence. The host begins to clean, not the room, not the mats, just the tools, slowly, painstakingly, with the seriousness of someone diffusing a bomb that's also a family heirloom. The tea scoop, the whisk, the bowl, each is purified in a ritual so precise it starts to feel sarcastic. You watch as he folds the cloth, wipes, folds again, inspects, and gently places each item down like it might shatter if it hears a loud thought. This is the check-in cleaning, not for hygiene, for symbolism. The tools are already clean. That's not the point. The cleaning is a reminder. These are not just objects. They are instruments of presence, of humility, of barely contained existential dread. Historians still argue whether this phase evolved from spiritual purification or from one tea master's obsessive-compulsive tendencies. Either way, it's working. You feel impure just watching it. You try not to fidget, but the tickle behind your ear has chosen violence. You scratch. The host hears it. Everyone hears it. You have committed a noise. Meanwhile, the ladle is given its own quiet farewell. A small twist of the wrist, a bow, a moment of stillness. The bamboo seems to sigh with relief or judgment. Hard to tell. Your body is now a sculpture of discomfort. The line between spiritual awakening and leg cramp is thinner than your patience. Remember the earlier bowl of thick tea. Your stomach does. It's now settling into a gentle confusion, unsure if it's been honored or hazed. The tools are returned to their places. Everything is slower now, like the room is winding itself down, but only after making sure you've suffered enough to deserve it. You watch the last drip of water fall into the kettle. It lands with a soft plink. You feel that plink in your soul. I'm still sitting. That's the main thing. You haven't stood, haven't stretched, haven't fled into the garden to scream softly into a pine tree. But now comes the most delicate stage of the ceremony, pretending you're not the problem. The host sits back, his hands resting lightly on his thighs. His face gives nothing away, not approval, not disdain, just the serene neutrality of a man who's watched hundreds of guests fail to kneel properly. You realize this entire ceremony has been about watching, not with eyes necessarily, but with presence. Every movement, every silence, every sip, and now, in the calm after the ritual, you are the one being observed, not judged, but examined, like a cracked bowl that's still somehow holding tea. Historians still argue whether this portion of the ceremony was meant for reflection or just a polite holding pattern before guests could crawl out again. Either way, the pressure hasn't lifted. It's just softer now, like a heavy blanket on a warm night. You sit there, your knees two overcooked dumplings, your back a lowercase r. The host inclines his head slightly, maybe a nod, maybe an assessment. You respond with an equally ambiguous nod, which you hope translates to, "I suffered beautifully." Your fellow guests are statues of subtle pain. No one speaks, because no one is supposed to. The tea is finished. The tools are cleaned. The silence is now your performance space. You try not to ruin it. Remember the flower under the scroll. It's still wilting, but with dignity. You aspire to be that flower. Your legs whisper threats. Your spine suggests rebellion. But you stay, because it would be worse to leave early, like a barbarian with somewhere more important to be. And so you remain. In the stillness, a guest, a vessel, a slowly collapsing shrine to self-restraint. It ends with a sip, just one final polite swallow of thin tea, passed with the same reverence as a crown or a curse. You lift the bowl, you bow, you rotate, you drink, and then it's over. Except, it's not. The tea is gone, yes. But now begins the second ceremony, pretending you understood any of it. There are no claps, no fanfare, no host handing you a souvenir fan, just a series of subtle gestures, gentle nods, and what might be a look of muted relief from the person to your left. Or maybe gas. It's hard to tell. You shift to the side slightly, offering the tiniest of bows toward your host. He returns, it with a movement so small it might be imaginary. You suspect he's already forgotten your name. The guests begin to adjust their knees, groaning softly through their teeth in the way of people who desperately want to stretch, but refuse to be. First, you are all quietly unraveling. The utensils are returned to their lacquered boxes. The scroll, still smug, remains where it is. The flower looks moments away from giving up. Historians still argue whether the closing of the ceremony held deeper symbolic meaning, or was simply the functional need to stand before one's legs gave out entirely. The host makes a final bow, deeper this time, the signal, the release. You bow in return, though at this point, you're just tilting your torso while praying your legs will reboot. You begin the slow, awkward process of rising. Joints crack like tiny fireworks. You try not to grunt. You fail. Your legs have aged 10 years. Your lower back is filing complaints. Your feet might sue. You take one last look around. The hearth is now just warm ash. The tools are asleep. The kettle hums its soft farewell. And you are mostly tea and tension, but you survived. Somehow. You shuffle backward across the tatami, doing your best impression of someone who knows how to move without offending geometry. Crawling out the same way you came in, through that tiny, humiliating doorway, you realize something grim. This part is even harder when your legs are pudding. You duck, you bow, you exit. You do not look back. Partly out of respect, partly because your neck has joined your knees in open rebellion. Outside, the air feels scandalously mobile. You can hear birds, leaves, the rustle of distant life that does not involve whisking powdered grass. You exhale, and it's louder than anything you did inside. The other guests emerge behind you, like survivors of a spiritual boot camp. No one speaks, because silence doesn't just stay in the tea room, it follows. You, the host, slides the door closed with the soft finality of a monk sealing a tomb. The ceremony is over, but your thoughts are still trapped inside. Historians still argue whether this final departure was meant to symbolize rebirth, or merely a return to outer chaos after inner stillness. Either way, your ankles feel like they've been through both. You retrieve your swords. They feel absurdly heavy now, not just in weight, but in concept. After what you've just experienced, brandishing a blade feels loud, unrefined, like bringing a drum into a library. You walk past the stone path, once clean and deliberate, now somehow messier beneath your softened eyes. Everything seems a little more fragile, a little more absurd. Remember the ladle, the scroll, the single wilting flower. They all said more than any general's speech ever could. And now, with your armor creaking and your tea-stained soul sloshing, gently inside you, you step back into the world. It's louder out here, faster, less coordinated, and strangely, you already miss the silence that judged you. You walk slowly now, not because you want to, but because your joints have been turned to antique furniture. The sun is lower, casting longer shadows across the mossy path. You're not quite sure how much time passed in that tiny room, but it feels like at least a season. Your companions peel away one by one, nodding silently, still clinging to the hush of the experience like it's part of their clothing. You're alone now, save for the faint creak of your armor and the soft slap of your sandals on the stone. The city noises begin to filter back in. The distant thunk of a wooden bucket, the shrill cry of a market hawker, the chatter of children who have no idea what it means to fail at sitting properly for 2 hours. And still, you're holding yourself differently, straighter, but also slower, like every movement is being measured by some invisible Teishu lurking in the clouds. You think back to the ceremony, how it asked nothing of you but expected everything, how you bowed to a scroll, drank liquid lawn clippings, and treated a flower like a spiritual mentor. Historians still argue whether the tea ceremony was designed to humble warriors or to offer them a battlefield where no one dies, except maybe their pride. You remember the first awkward sip, the taste of matcha, slightly bitter, strangely calming. You remember the silence, the stillness, the constant internal monologue of, "Am I doing this right?" To which the ceremony responded, "That's the point." Even now, hours later, your knees still remember the mats. Your palms still recall the texture of the bowl. Your soul still feels gently exercised. And somehow, beneath all that discomfort, a kind of peace has settled in. Not loud, not triumphant, just there. Like the warmth of a cooling hearth. You survived, and next time, you might even bow before hitting your head.